The sensation of Den's healing magic was eerily similar to eating a senzu, although not as quick. Firstly, there was a sudden, warm, and welcoming feeling of relief washing over Goku's entire body, dulling the immediate sensations of pain through the length of it. The bleeding cuts and bruises, visible on his exposed upper body and hidden by leftover clothing, vanished into nothingness. Bent and broken bones were restored to their old selves. Lastly, the scorching burnout of the Kaioken dimmed, lessened, and finally stopped. By the time the brief spell did its job, Goku was able to stand up straight without something in his back creaking, and breathe without his throat throbbing. Standing there in the lookout with Den and Mr. Popo, he clenched and unclenched his hands, staring intently at them. After kicking Frieza to a large and angry curb, Goku teleported over to them. He'd hoped to get a senzu, but with none around, Den's healing abilities were the next best thing. He didn't feel overly bad about getting a second wind. Broly got 2 of those. This was just evening out the odds. Is everything alright, Goku? Oh yeah, he replied, giving himself a look over. It's just, I usually get pretty beaten up by the time Ultra Instinct kicks in. Haven't ever felt this rested with it. He suddenly punched the air, once, twice, thrice, then hundreds of times, followed by an equally swift kicking sequence. Jumping and somersaulting across the length of the lookout, Goku continued practicing his attacks in increasingly elaborate motions. In the tournament of power, what with opponents everywhere and the clock ticking down, it was impossible to just stop and enjoy Ultra Instinct like this. Even for the briefest time. The fluidity of motion, the way many of his moves exerted just the right amount of ki necessary. But not all of them. His attacks lacked the precision, speed, and distinctiveness of the real Ultra Instinct. Goku had to make his attacks happen through thought, not his body, knowing where and what to do independent of him. Disappointingly, his clash with Broly had only brought him a part of the way into the state. Shortly after, Goku landed back to where Den and Mr. Popo stood, studying his closed, right fist. I got some of Ultra Instinct back, but not everything. See, can you win with just that? Den asked, gulping and sweating drops as big as rocks. This Broly's his power's incredible, and he's not getting any weaker. He's a tough one, but I'll manage, Goku coolly assured the God of Earth, sensing the battle between him and Frieza all the way back to the North Pole. Although, given what he felt, calling it a fight wasn't actually right. Thanks, for helping me out, Den, I owe ya one. Oh, it's nothing at all, he gave a shaky laugh, still intimidated by Goku's appearance. Just please, stop this chaos before it's too late. Don't worry, round 2'll be the last. His surroundings altered drastically once his instantaneous teleportation brought him back to the North Pole. The sunny, clear sky above the lookout was replaced by a red one with thick black and brown clouds plotting everything out. If there was any ice left, all the lava they had punched and blasted up to the surface would have incinerated it by then. Even the air was unpleasant. Looking off to the distance, Goku noticed Bulma, Whis, and Vegeta still hanging around. Tossing Frieza over to Broly worked out, keeping the big guy occupied instead of gunning for his friends. Speaking of Frieza, he suddenly came flying through the far side of a nearby, crumbling mountain. To most people, he'd be little more than a white blur of motion in the air. Goku saw him clearly, however, and it wasn't a pretty sight. During his short absence, Frieza had already lost the bottom chunk of his tail. His usually white body covered in black, blue, and bloody purple cuts and bruises all over. When he finally slammed into a nearby wall, he slumped against it, groaning weakly, barely conscious. Goku only wasted one more thought on him, thinking about how he deserved the punishment before turning over to Broly. In a mad rush, the big guy burst through the mountain, leveling it in his wake, stopping when he noticed Goku standing on the battlefield. From the way his blank eyes widened, and his mouth hung agape, it was clear some sense was left even in Broly's rageful mind. Not that it lasted long. Now his attention was fixed entirely on his returning opponent. Alright, time to test this out. Arms hanging loosely, Goku stood tall and observed the way Broly flew toward him. Where his attacks before were too fast to even react to, now they were clear and appeared even sluggish. In almost excruciatingly slow detail, Goku observed the way Broly's fist pulled back for the impending punch, the saliva in the corners of his mouth, the roar buzzing in his ears. With no prompting from Goku himself, his body reacted all on its own, ducking under this and many more attacks to come. Goku paid attention to the Mad Saiyan for only a little while longer, making sure even his spiking energy wasn't closing the power gap anytime soon. Once it became clear he couldn't, the focus shifted over to Ultra Instinct itself. Despite the heat that came from powering it up, the state on the inside was surprisingly relaxed. Even calmer than Super Saiyan Blue was. It reminded him of meditation, the hyper-awareness of everything around oneself but also a sort of absence from everything all at the same time. Pressed back to a nearby mountain from all the dodging, Goku's legs did their work for him, leaping from one protrusion to another while Broly pursued. Absently, Goku noted how bloody furious he'd become, forgetting he could even fly, clawing and jumping up the mountain like some crazed baboon. Most of his thoughts were on his ki, precisely where it came from. Becoming a Super Saiyan could be triggered by anger, and usually was the first time. But closer practice with it revealed there was a tingling sensation in the back, a sort of nerve bundle that, when discovered, could help trigger the transformation. Super Saiyan God was different from it. There was no anger involved, and the power seemed to come from the center of the chest. Super Saiyan Blue was tapping into both of these key centers, funneling the energy of God through the Super Saiyan back bundle, cooling off the aggression from the original form. As far as Goku could sense, this Ultra Instinct technique came from somewhere in his head. It was a faint difference, but in his mind's eye, he could see all this new power running through his entire body originating from there. Guess it makes sense, he thought, blankly realizing Broly was firing ki blasts at him. When Kefla socked me in the head, Ultra Instinct came rushing out of me. I even smacked her attacks away without thinking too. Thinking about his attacks, Goku noticed one of Broly's beams zip past his tilted head and became curious. With as little thought as possible, he tried to deflect the attacks away. Even with the full Ultra Instinct unavailable to him, the power increase difference left him just a bit stunned. Just minutes ago, trying to survive a single one of these blasts would have been more than he could handle. Now, his hands almost lazily went in strange, oddly hypnotizing motions with each deflection. Broly's attacks were so useless, Goku actually felt nothing as he struck each one away with a chop. This ain't gonna work. Jiren's moves are what got me to Ultra Instinct for real last time, Broly'll have to lots better than this. Perceiving his opponent's strength, it still rose, but far more slowly. The initial rush of potential bursting out of him from Super Saiyan wasn't letting him leap across whole echelons of power. Thankfully, Kale and Broly were very similar, and that was all the information he needed to plan out his next move. While he focused some of his attention to swatting aside the blasts, Goku kept an eye out for a particularly timed one and waited patiently until his foot shot out. The kick sent Broly's blast right back to its owner, more specifically inside his mouth. The gargantuan Saiyan gulped it down, his throat bulging like a frog's until he started coughing and gurgling out nasty, black smoke. It didn't stay in for much longer, not when Goku's elbow strike into Broly's chest knocked every bit out air from his lungs. Then, with no great fuss, Goku floated to his right side and with as much force as necessary to piss him off and not outright knock him out, crescent kicked Broly in the face and into the sky. From the cliffs at the edge of the battlefield, Bulma, Vegeta, and Whis watched the whole thing and more as Goku and Broly engaged one another in the sky. For Bulma, this was much easier now as Whis conjured a pair of fancy, alien binoculars for her. Though the combatants still looked like blurs most of the time, it was easy enough to know where they approximately were, thanks to the booming noises and explosions. Man, Goku's new power is amazing, she commented, watching Broly completely fail to so much as touch him. If he keeps this up, he'll win for sure. To her right, Vegeta's sour look was accompanied by a grumble about show-offs. Whis, meanwhile, chuckled. The second she heard it, a chill ran down her spine. What's so funny? She hesitantly asked, looking away from the fight. Goku can already win the fight. The power he's using currently is but a portion of what even the incomplete Ultra Instinct is capable of. But why then? She paused and gulped, the answer becoming stupidly clear to her. Oh, no. Oh yes, Whis said. In the Tournament of Power, Goku's usage of Ultra Instinct was always pressured, never allowing him a chance to even practice the form in more measured conditions. Now, however, the odds are far more in his favor. He can simply allow himself to remain within the state, let his mind and body both acclimate to it while Broly serves as a good sparring partner. For now, at any rate. For now, she squeaked when another resounding detonation of ki brought her attention back to the fight. In the skies, Goku made full use of the free space, using nothing but his raw speed and ultra instincts evading power to dance around Broly. Attacking him from every possible angle, but most prominently at places that were liable to tick anyone off. An eye poke or two, a slap in the ear, a headbutt to the crotch. The big guy responded to everyone, attacking with even more power than before. Still not on Jiren's level, though, Goku thought, remembering the intensity of their blow trading. How relentless it was, not giving him even a second to think or act, propelling him even deeper into Ultra Instinct. Broly, as he was then, simply couldn't compare even to Goku's laid-back power. Looks like I'll have to kick things up a notch. Accessing more of his Ultra Instinct power, Goku rushed forward, leaving an afterimage behind which Broly mistook for him. Then, he repeated this over and over again. In seconds, the giant Saiyan was surrounded by hundreds of afterimages, all executed with such speed they looked closer to actual clones. While Broly gaped at the small army surrounding him, Goku started the next part of the plan. As he zipped from one spot to another, still leaving more images, he opened fire on Broly with a continuous stream of smaller Kamehamehas. He tried to swat them away, to counterattack, but Goku's barrage soon overwhelmed him. Each blast hit somewhere else, upside the head, across the back, in his exposed arms. Each one burned worse than the other. Eventually, all Broly could do was put his arms over his head and try to block out the pain. But it didn't stop, and he couldn't smash it away. He couldn't do anything but suffer it, like a weakling. It was just like before, the same kind of overwhelming pain that left him hurting all over. From the remote. And as this single, coherent train of thought entered his mind, reminding him of things the anger made him forget about, he snapped all over again. Goku's body sensed it well before he did, automatically blasting far away from Broly himself and breaking off the attack. The initial burst of new power reverberated with such speed and force, Goku even lost control of his own flight for a brief moment. Steadying himself on the ground, he looked up and stared at the sensation buzzing through his head like a busted radio noise. The swirling ki around Broly became so thick it almost looked black and not green. His chest piece exploded, and his muscles grew to even more absurd proportions. His blank eyes glowed red, and his hair turned green. So, this is his real power. Goku muttered, feeling a wave of worry and excitement overcome the cooling effect of Ultra Instinct on his mind. Out of all the people he'd gotten a chance to fight, it was among the most powerful keys he'd ever felt. It was what Goku wanted and needed to take his training to the next level, and there was no way he'd pass it up. With a simple deep breath, he simmered down and focused on exerting as much of Ultra Instinct's power as he could. Wordlessly, a pillar of blue ki surrounded him, piercing into the sky and through the thick, black clouds hanging overhead. Allowing himself a moment to look deeper within, Goku got confirmation of his earlier assessment. There was a source of power coming from his head. The release of his full power was simultaneously overwhelming and barely noticeable. In a challenge to Goku's release of ki, Broly roared and did one of his own, releasing a twisting whirlwind of green energy, pounding his chest and shouting all the while. Goku intensified his own output, without so much as making a sound. The two stood there, watching one another, a current of electricity forming around their competing energies. Then, they both charged forward. The white flash from their collision was so powerful, Bulma yelped and tossed the binoculars away, rubbing her eyes. Or, she would have, if the shockwave hadn't nearly blown her from the cliffside. Luckily, Vegeta caught and held on to her tightly, even if he too swayed from the shockwaves blasting through the wind. Thanks, she mumbled and snuggled close to his chest, shaking all over. From fear or Goku and Broly's attacks, she couldn't quite tell. Hesitantly, she looked back to the point they'd smashed into each and felt her jaw hit the floor. The white collision didn't disappear. Instead, it seemed to surround the two of them, growing bigger and bigger with each passing second. Every attack they threw at each other caused the expansion, and every boom sounded like the beating of a giant heart, or a bomb waiting to go off. What the hell is that? Vegeta shouted over the chaos, shielding his eyes. That is an annihilation sphere, Whis shouted back, withstanding the ongoing disaster like it was nothing at all. It's quite a rare phenomenon, you see, an accumulation of so much destructive power that it can destroy all life in an entire universe should it detonate. The universe. Vegeta and Bulma blurted out together. They're going to destroy the universe. I don't believe it will come to that, Whis shrugged. Although, when gods of destruction, or those comparable in power clash, such devastation is to be expected. The fact Whis decided then to conjure an energy ball around them didn't make them feel any better. Nor did anyone else on Earth or indeed across the universe. Men, women, and children panicked as the seas went wild, and the ground shook from under them. Animals panicked, migrating an entire season too early or even seeking shelter with their natural enemies. High above on his lookout, the god of Earth trembled and feared for his planet, while another babysitting a little girl couldn't decide if he was afraid or excited by what he sensed. Broly and Goku didn't notice or care about any of this. Locked in an endless loop of exchanged punches, kicks, elbow and knee strikes, evasions, and blocks, nothing else existed for either of them. The former was at the height of his anger. He didn't understand or know that his actions could kill some of the only people left in the universe that cared about him. The latter was too busy immersing himself in a state beyond instinct. With each moment, Goku felt a familiar sensation overtake him, a feeling of almost dream-like eyes wiping everything else away. Pain, excitement, stress, fear, none of it mattered, none of it existed anymore. There wasn't even the spot in his head where Ultra Instinct came from. For a while, there was absolutely nothing, and to a point, all of these things and more returned. Goku felt pain. He understood the danger of the power they'd created. His body didn't react to any of it. Just the fight. Broly, whose vast speed was so inferior then he might as well have been frozen, threw another punch. Goku's hands caught the attack, and the rest of his body bent with such speed and force, Broly was tossed from the annihilation sphere and rammed into the ground before he could even begin to understand how it happened. Goku took another calm breath and let his ki seep out of his body in a multidirectional bind. The same technique which he'd pinned Broly down with before was now magnified by the power of the completed Ultra Instinct. Its silvery light enveloped around the annihilation sphere, locking it into place so it couldn't detonate. Then, with a slow, steady motion, Goku brought his outstretched arms closer together, causing the bind and annihilation sphere both to shrink the closer his palms got. In seconds, the sphere was little more than the size of a peanut, before Goku's clapped his palms together and annihilated it from existence. He remained floating there, noting how their clash had blown away the black clouds. Overhead, the sun was setting, and the great heat of the lava had simmered down. Goku looked at his hands, the way they seemed to be more and less connected to him than ever before. Then, he closed his eyes, taking a deep breath, and focusing on the ki running through his body. The origin point of Ultra Instinct was perfectly clear to him, how it worked, how it connected to the rest of his body. He'd never felt so in control of it, so outside its control. He remained floating there, even as Broly burst from the rubble and charged at him. Goku didn't pay any attention, nor did he stop his meditative trance. He didn't need to. His body did all the work for him. It floated gently from Broly's overhead punch and positioned itself at the best point to take him down instantly. The back of the neck was a sensitive area for most fighters, and with enough force, even the strongest could get knocked down from a simple tap to it. Broly was no different. The lightest tap of Goku's index finger sent an electrifying current of force running through every nerve in his body that Broly didn't even feel any pain whatsoever. He simply let out a single, hitched breath and fainted in midair. Catching him by the end of the animal pelt, Goku gently lowered him to the ground. All without thinking about any of it. Nor did have to think or stop his meditation when an insignificant, red ki blast suddenly tried to skewer him from behind. Goku's body traversed to the spot where Frieza hid in an instant, appearing in front of him. For this, he did decide to interrupt his meditation on Ultra Instinct, looking down at the beaten old creep snarling and baring his teeth. "You really are a fool," Goku said, curling his lip. "But I guess I am too, fair thinkin' this time'd be different." Different, Frieza repeated, and then he laughed, hard. What? Did you believe our alliance in the Tournament of Power changed anything? That I would leave you be out of some sudden sense of friendship? From a changed heart. Ha, ridiculous. Gotta agree with ya there. You and Lord Beerus and Vegeta. I keep forgetting how much of a scumbag you are. Not anymore. You've run out of chances, Frieza. HMPH, you say that now. He smiled, even as Goku noticed a few beads of sweat rolling down the side of his face. But I won't stay down. You'll need me for something, to aid you in some foolishness of your own making or simply because you want me to be your perfect sparring partner. Not really, Goku shrugged. Thanks to you, we've got Broly. He's much stronger than you, and not a bad guy. A much better sparring partner than you'll ever be. Well then, Frieza said with fake ease, letting his hands fall to his sides. It seems we've reached the end of. Before he could get on Goku's nerves any more than he already did, a punch to the face shut Frieza up permanently. His body, as expected, vanished over to Enma's, where Goku would pay a visit to later. To make sure Frieza got even more little hell angels visiting him from here on out. But that was for later. Right then, while he still could, Goku closed his eyes and continued his meditation and path to mastering Ultra Instinct.